Hello, everyone out there. Hopefully we've got good sound coming through for you and good video coming through for you. And we'll kick it off here. So I'm Todd Robinson from OpenMetal, and I'm here with Jimmy McArthur out of the OpenInfra Foundation, a favorite of ours. And so I hope we have a good conversation today about VMware and OpenStack and kind of the rough edges, the smooth edges, and all the good things that OpenStack is bringing to the table to be able to help out in this changeover in the VM world. So, Jimmy, if you don't mind, maybe a quick intro of yourself, and then we'll dig into some questions.
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to the conversation. I'm Jimmy McArthur with the OpenInfra Foundation. I work in business development, which for a nonprofit software foundation means I spend my days talking to users and operators of OpenStack, public and private clouds all over the world. So it's a pleasure to dig into what I think is a pretty meaty subject, and kind of one of the most interesting business opportunities I've seen roll around in quite some time.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really exciting time for OpenStack. Both we in the OpenMetal world, we sit. We're often bringing customers off of the public cloud, the mega public clouds, you could call them. And for us, we've had great success there because there's so much pressure, both price and just dissatisfaction with service levels and things like that in the public cloud. So for us to also see this opportunity come rolling around from the VMware side, it's been a bit of a challenge for us because we're having great success already in one area, but we also see this opportunity here. So yeah, that's what we're here to talk about today. And Jimmy, if you don't mind, maybe start us out with what is the situation? Maybe a little bit about 2024, things that happened. How did we get to this spot? Just to kind of get everybody on the same page.
Yeah, sure. So I think starting in the beginning of 2024. Backing up a little bit further, Broadcom acquired VMware, for those that don't know, and that kind of started taking shape at the end of 2023 and was fully announced in 2024. And I think there was a lot of anticipation about what they were going to do, but what ended up happening was like more sort of out there, I think, than anyone would have thought. Prices were increased for VMware users, sometimes up to 500x their current contract. So all of these new contracts are coming through, and it created a lot of panic, I think. It created a lot of question marks for decision makers that have possibly not looked at another solution besides VMware for a decade or more. And it resulted in the need for a lot of market education around what kinds of solutions are out there, and how can I not get my company in this situation again.
Yeah, no, and I think we started to see the uptake in interest also in 2024, and I know well, some of the big questions that are always going to be out there is like, what you are probably reliant on VMware as a company, and so at what stage are you really saying like, look, I am reliant right now, but I need to open the doors for myself in the future. So what I could think when you're thinking about like the company situations that they're in, they're clearly got contracts, they've got agreements, they've got expertise in-house. How do you start navigating this decision? And maybe share with us a little bit about, what might be the factors that have come up for you before or that are coming up now. And we've got our own take here at OpenMetal. I'll join you with some thoughts after your view.
Sure. Yeah, I think what I've observed is you've got sort of two buckets. One is the small to medium-sized businesses that are running VMware. Maybe they have for a long time. It's a simple installation, and it's easy enough to look at moving off of VMware to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I can get into the whys of why you should look at open source only a little bit later. But like this other bucket are folks that have a much more complex VMware installation. Their VPC is maybe more complex than and spread out across the company. You know, to your point, lots of folks that they're paying to maintain this. They've got maybe a super complicated network topology. So those folks are kind of holding to try to figure out what their next best steps are, and what the ecosystem around other solutions looks like.
Yeah, interesting. I've got I'm going to borrow actually from two different companies that recently signed in with us and their journey that they had, because I think they're going to follow a little bit of what you've described. So let's call them customer A. Neither of these are actually public about it, and we're great with that. We love being the behind the scenes open stackers. But one of the companies, they were, I guess you would call them a little bit, they haven't reached the stage where they have automated the deployments of their systems. And so what they were faced with is many VPCs individually configured and set up, and didn't have the ability to do anything but migrate. So the second case, I'll come back to the ones that are more comfortable with infrastructure as code and the ability to migrate by just recreation. But so the first group, so OpenMetal basically works like this, because there's a learning curve typically with OpenStack when you're coming out of VMware. We have these little miniature private clouds that you can just kind of hit the button and have a complete Ceph-backed OpenStack. And so first thing we did for this customer was, okay, look, you're gonna need to get yourself grounded into, okay, you used to do it with this way for VMware, now you've got to do it this way for OpenStack. And so we gave them one of these clouds, and at the same time, and let their team get in there, start getting familiar with this stuff. We've got some tutorials and documentation to follow this. But in the end, they selected the type of kind of permanent home that they're going to need. And then they had to go into a migration process. And so I think we're probably going to flip a few names up here. So we, as an OpenStack community member, we leveraged in this case some outside help from some companies that actually specialize in this. We'll put some names up there, and we've got some people helping us out, Lauren and Sasha on the back end here. If you don't mind, maybe start rolling through some of those migration names that are up there. But yeah, for us, it was great because we were able to leverage some of these other companies that their specialty was actually in this migration.
Sure.
So yeah, give me, Jimmy, if you don't mind, before I jump to the larger scale one. Yeah, if you don't mind, maybe chime in on that and just what you're seeing, and if that feels true to course, I guess, that you have been seeing out there.
Yeah, I think you know, as you mentioned, there's cloud-based solutions, Coriolis, Vert2Vert. I assume they're going to roll through, so I'm not going to trouble myself naming them all. But there are lots of solutions to get VMware instances over to OpenStack, and I think for these smaller businesses, as you said, it's kind of an easy move. And there are two tacks. You know, one is migrating directly, and then the other one is standing up a brand new OpenStack instance and then just kind of recreating things over there. And I think it kind of depends on what kind of tooling you're using in VMware. But I think, you know, to your point, you know, OpenMetal provides this super clickable, super easy way to run OpenStack. And I think that's really the kind of comfort zone that you need to put VMware users in.
Yeah. I think the team there has skipped forward into like Mirantis and Rackspace. Actually, if you all don't mind, rewind back to the Coriolises and HiStacks. Yeah, those are the places that we want to be. But yeah, that is definitely what we found, is that depending on the type of customer, let's say if they're the medium size, the smaller, the very, very large, they have followed different patterns with us. But the familiarity with VMware, and many people, in a great way, they're very brand attached to VMware and are even trepidatious a bit to get into the OpenStack world. And I would say, I think, like, if I was thinking about opportunity, I know we're probably this video is going to be more of interest in many cases to people looking to pull these types of customers over versus just the customers that are out there. There are rough, depending on the type of customer that you're targeting, there are some rough edges. And being able to look at, hey, this is the experience that customers have had and they're used to in the VM world, and how they're going to actually go through this process to get onto OpenStack and get familiar and find out, which service is what, how does it map, which are the, little bit areas that where you're like, I don't spend that much time in there, and I need better documentation, or I need an easier way to do it. I definitely encourage companies to be looking at this kind of ideal customer profile and understanding where they sit in there. And so, and then you got to document stuff. You've got to take the time to be very clear about, like, hey, this is what it is. VMware is super productized. I mean, I always feel a little awkward when I'm in there kind of going like, oh, I feel like I'm back in the old days a little bit with the dashboards and how they are almost like old Windowsy type stuff. But in reality, there's a ton of great stuff inside of their system. And in many cases, people are looking for that. Yeah, so I think for us, having an ecosystem that can support this, I think there's there's huge upside. Just like you said, to get us started, is that upside is there. So all right, I was wondering a little bit. Is it, if you don't mind, yeah, Jimmy, if you could talk a little bit about your experience with the larger companies and what you're seeing out there, and then I'll switch over and I'll kind of talk through what happened very recently for one of ours that came in.
Sure. Yeah, and I would say within that larger bucket, there's kind of two paths that people could take. One would be, we've got a big engineering team. We're ready to make the move over to OpenStack today. We know we're going to have to invest some time in it, but what we've got is so massive. And one of the customers that comes to mind is Geico, who recently moved everything off of VMware and onto OpenStack. And, it's a big undertaking. Obviously, Geico is a massive company. You're talking about workloads for their entire customer base, plus their internal private cloud use. So big deployment, right? And they understand and that they're going to need to invest in their own data center footprint and their own engineers to manage that. And then on the other side, you have folks that are very comfortable with VMware and the support that they have provided over the years. VMware had what, a 93% market share. So like it's companies of all stripes are kind of looking at this thing. But so for this other kind of group, I think we see, they're looking for something like a commercially supported distribution of OpenStack, right? They want, an OpenMetal, or they want a Red Hat or a Canonical, somebody that can really kind of help guide them and hold their hand, and provide that kind of familiar interface that feels a little bit more comfortable. And then in that instance, they don't have to invest in those engineering resources.
Yeah, so I think we've got an example actually that recently came through. So I was thinking, we're aligned with that. I'll kind of just give their journey with us, and that may actually help companies relate to this. So they run a very large infrastructure running on VMware. And in their case, they have both a blended hosted, where they have gone to a hosting company, and then they also have some stuff in the data center. And so their journey was they got the bill, or they got the notice of what the bill was going to be. They have a certain time frame left on their contract. So one is, I would just say for everybody, open your contract, your agreements, make sure you know what your dates are. They may be a good portion in the future, which gives you some time. But I would just say, go grab your legal or whoever signed that and be absolutely certain you know what that date is, because those can be super disruptive numbers. And they were in that situation. They had it. They knew what their time frame was, and so they knew they had some space until that contract was going to renew. And so first thing they did was say, hey. They came into us and they said, I see actually the QR code in the upper right there. I think that's the team here told me that will lead whoever wants to grab it from there to what I'm going to describe. Is so we allow companies to come on and essentially learn how OpenStack works. So it was the same thing for this company. As they said, first, well, just give me a cloud. Let me be familiar with this. And here is the documentation. And we're very technically savvy. So they were a very, very technical company. And they got in there and they absorbed. They assigned an engineer that was their core responsibility, was to learn how this system worked. So they took that person off whatever they were working on and put them on and said, hey, you're going to go in there and learn this. You're going to follow this guide that OpenMetal has provided. You're going to dig into the OpenStack documentation. You're going to understand how this works. And they ran like that for a month or two. They got on a regular cadence with us. So that engineer was meeting with us. We joined him up on our Slack so that they could ask questions easily of engineer to engineer stuff. They spent a couple months on there kind of perfecting, like, well, here's how I automate it. Here, they were a Terraform and Ansible company, so they were skilled there. So they basically figured out, okay, I used to talk to VMware this way. I'm going to be talking to OpenStack this way. And so that went on for a little bit. They learned how to bring services up and down. They learned kind of okay, here's how we're going to set resources for projects, VPCs, analogous projects in OpenStack. And they essentially went and recreated. Now, they are pretty savvy in the sense of that they can create their deployments as infrastructure as code, which actually was very important for them when it came time to do the migration. So anyways, fast forward a couple months, they'd gone through that process. They had brought several other team members up to speed. More people started to join into the project for them. Then they went to the production cluster. So production cluster then came online, and they were already 80% comfortable with this stuff. They did their final tests, and they had gotten to the point where they had relatively trivially able to just say, you know what, stop creating these resources on VMware, start creating them over here on OpenStack, and started pointing their customers in. Now, they're only like 1/10 of the way through this process. And so I would definitely encourage all the companies out there that help us sell OpenStack to these, or companies considering this, is it does take time when there's large systems, and you're not going to do it overnight. But know your end dates. Get your contract dates. So that's
right.
Don't lose track of that 100%. And then just step into it. OpenStack is incredibly powerful, like any big cloud system that you're going to be using, any big infrastructure system. But there's the top 10 things that are important to you. Get to know those top 10 things. Build off of others. Look at the documentation. I know that documentation can be a little bit overwhelming for people, but take your time. And you do need to assign those staff members just time to do so, and picking a pretty solid system administrator, skills wise, with a decent set of experience is really wise to kind of be your first person to get in there and learn and build off of others. So I ran on there. Jimmy, anything you want to kind of add to that as I was wandering along there?
There's a couple things I would touch on there. And I actually was part of another program earlier today talking about a very similar topic around VMware migration. And I think one of the points that those folks kept driving home, which I think is important, is it's important when you're looking to move customers over to OpenStack to understand what services they're actually using in VMware. Like a lot of folks maybe have they have the whole kitchen sink set of services at VMware, but maybe they only use a small fraction of them, right? And I think trying to understand what problems they're trying to solve with their deployment and how you can make that move over to OpenStack and make that make sense to them is an important way to look at it. There's not necessarily one-to-one feature parity between VMware and OpenStack, but there are there are projects that are very similar. There are also a set of companies and that can help fill the niche that maybe some of those partners that you were working with on your VMware install. Different types of storage vendors, for instance, or different types of backup and recovery vendors. And so really helping them understand what the OpenStack way is to do things. And in a lot of cases, you end up with something that's more powerful than what they had before, even if they had that whole kitchen sink from VMware. And I think helping to communicate that to companies that it's okay, that this is a scary move, right? People have been stuck on this for, a decade or more. And so making that move requires that new training, a new way of thinking. And that's kind of what your job is as a private cloud or a consultant on OpenStack, is to help them understand how we do things.
Yeah, no, you're dead on. Like that is a big part of the value. And I think we're super techie, so sometimes I don't think we give enough thought or justice to like, hey, some of it's just being willing to talk to them, you share your expertise, and then introduce them to the experts when it falls outside of your range. Like I suspect that we'll throw up Trilio. We love working with them. Storeware is another one that we're excited to have more relationship with. But being able to turn to somebody to like Trilio and say, help us out with this. This customer is very concerned with disaster recovery. And we don't have the breadth of experience that you do. So let's do something like this together. Because it is an ecosystem. I think when we do struggle with this a little bit, and I think we're learning also when you start to take on really large organizations, especially like coming off of VMware, where it was very productized and everything is in this window right here. When a company is coming into us and realizing like, actually, I'm going to go from a couple vendors, maybe I was VMware on AWS or something, so I'm going to go from a couple vendors to like 6 or 7. That can be nerve-wracking for them as an organization that's maybe not so used to that or didn't like that before, and we're happy to move to a smaller number of vendors and vendor relationships. So we're trying to even explore is what is the right way to do that. Should we be the front company and working with them as partners, but that the agreement is with us to keep it simpler for enterprises and also to have an SLA, right? Like, 'cause sometimes a lot of what they're buying is the SLA. It's like they don't necessarily want to look under the hood. They're going to look at you and go like, do you know what you're doing? And will you back that up with like a legit SLA that will affect you if you don't follow, your guarantees. So yeah, any thoughts on that? What do we see companies that are doing that well in the OpenStack world that are particularly good at these large and maybe even larger enterprisey type sales?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is Rackspace.
Yeah. Okay.
They're sort of recently back as a platinum member of the OpenInfra Foundation. They saw an opportunity like OpenMetal did, and like a lot of organizations did, and they're pivoting heavily into OpenStack for their customers, and they're doing they've got a partnership with KT Telecom. They've got partnerships with other large telcos, and there's also Red Hat and again Canonical that are prepared to help you with this kind of like more complex and really want that sort of hand holding. But at the same time, you look at a company like Rackspace, and I want to go back a little bit because one of the fears I think that a lot of these companies have is, oh no, I just am trying to get out of this horrible VMware contract. They just put the screws to me. Why would I want to jump into another commercial contract? And I think one of the things that OpenStack provides is this platform that, like, you can try it here, you can try it there, and you could try it over there as well. And the freedom of having that open source software solution is that you can move your workloads wherever you want as long as it stays on OpenStack. And so with these companies like Rackspace are doing something where they'll help train up your VMware engineers, they'll help set up your data center in-house, and then they'll leave you alone once you're ready to go. And so I think everywhere from back to the small to medium size to these very large solutions, I think there is an ecosystem out there that can help all these folks. And as you get larger and you become more successful on OpenStack, it's easy enough to move your deployment to some other service provider, or maybe you want to move it in house and run it yourself. And so I don't know. Sorry, I'm rambling.
Yeah, but it is a pattern that we have seen for years, where actually a company does run their own OpenStack in-house, but they also buy from us, and it's partly they've just accepted to say, look, there's a lot of knowledge out there, and the efficiencies that this is kind of a great thing, I think, now that we're in this world of the OpenStack as a an alternative that is absolutely coming up because of these drivers, the AWS mega cloud. Like, wow, you're killing me with your costs. Like, I can't do that as a business. And having VMware, you know, here's an interesting thought. So this is an off script one for you, Jimmy. I'll give you a thought. Is that when I saw, I've been looking a lot at like the escalation in infrastructure costs that a lot of these small, medium, large businesses have undergone. And it's huge, both driven by the mega clouds and then driven by something like this. But a thought that I had is that because that spread between a lot of the OpenStack providers and these other ones have grown so large, that I almost want to consciously say to the OpenStack community is, we have some rough edges when it comes to being able to adopt our product. How should we use some of that spread to put more money into ironing out those rough edges? So if you had to pick, and I shared with you earlier that sometimes for me to get my head straight about stuff is I like to go look at the contrarians to my viewpoint. And so I watched this very, very savvy, very experienced VMware person who had been selling in the world of VMware for a long time. And his answer was, you don't move. You bear the cost of this next renewal, and then you give yourself more time. But there are other alternatives, and he was introducing the other alternatives. But he didn't put up OpenStack as like a serious competitor. First off, I got a comment for him, so I'm dropping that to him a little bit later. But yeah, give me your view then of, is there some rough edges that we as the OpenStack community should identify and say, hey, that's a rough edge that makes it a little bit harder for people to adopt us, especially around these VMware target customers. Like I wouldn't, don't worry about like, you know, like we run Ironic Bifrost in the data center. I think that is clearly, like, I would never even think of replacing that ever with something else. Like, this is brilliance when it comes to parts of OpenStack. But for the use case of these medium-sized companies that might be coming off of VMware, anything that pops into your head that says, hey, we should iron that out, will be easier to adopt?
Yeah, and I would say, you know, this is something that, and this is the beauty of open source, is the community already identified those things last year, and they're being put into the latest release of OpenStack, which is Epoxy. So you should be seeing changes from projects that might have been kind of, for lack of a better word, might have fallen off a little bit, like Watcher, that has now had this renewed interest because folks are looking for some kind of, you know, something that works kind of like DRS, which is distributed resource scheduler. Huge feature in VMware, doesn't exactly exist today in OpenStack, but with this renewed kind of investment by the community, we should see that in Epoxy, and we should see an even further improvement in Flamingo. I mean, in another one is Freezer, which is for kind of managing storage. I think I might be getting this wrong, and this is what you get for the biz dev guy on the technical call. But the point is that there are these investments in projects to try to kind of bring up OpenStack to kind of meet that feature set that VMware users might be expecting. And again, I would also lean here on the ecosystem around OpenStack. And so even though it's maybe a little scary to embrace some new companies, some new partners, again, understand you have the same freedom there. So if I use Trilio for my migration, maybe I decide, I don't know, for the rest of my workloads, I want to move over to cloud-based solutions and use Coriolis. That's okay. And it all works together, and you kind of pick and choose who works best with you and who works best with your company and understands your goals the best.
For me, that's, yeah, Watcher, you might have seen me, I was note-taking here, because for me, when we as both the open source community or as a company are able to get close enough to the customer, and we've identified that particular use case, what the customer is doing, to just listen and go, okay, that's what you're facing. And guess what? The next customer says something very similar. The next customer says something very similar. It really lets us as an ecosystem focus our energy into these places to make them better. And yeah, for what you just said is wonderful. Like, I think that is a big deal for us. And we run the standard OpenStack, you would call it. We don't kind of make our own or package our own. So for us, it's very we're very dependent on the upstream to see these and go, yes, these are issues and what we can contribute, of course, is important too. But to just hear you say that, which of course I should have known that myself, but when you say that way, I think that's a great thing for the community. And some of those projects that have been a little bit less loved are now the reason they existed, were a real reason, and now it's more clear to us why they were there in the first place. We get to double down on them and bring that parity up. So yeah, that's good stuff. So I don't know if do you want to, if you're looking forward, I think that's some of it that you really covered already, what we might expect in 2025 and beyond. Anything else you want to add to that? And then I got a couple other questions for you.
Well, the one thing I think it's important to look at is understanding where your customer sits. It's, I think, talking about, and this is a discussion you and I had a few days ago, you talk about the different understanding of open source and the different understanding of where VMware is in the market, right? In North America, people are on hyperscalers. There's a lot of VMware users. Maybe they're comfortable moving to hyperscalers, but I think you're going to run into those same kind of price point problems, right? So in the US, you have to hit people in pocketbook savings so that companies can understand, hey, I can save a lot of money if I move over to OpenStack. And I think there's a lot of FUD out there saying that it's going to cost $5,000 a VM or something to move over. The numbers I've seen are closer to like 300, maybe. If it's a really complex VM, maybe it's $1,200, right? But the other thing is, like, other countries where there is opportunity for sales and for you to gain new customers, they have a very different understanding. Maybe open source is kind of a bad word in those areas, or they don't really have the knowledge about how to contribute to an open source community or what that means for their business. And so, I'm thinking of like Southeast Asia, for example.
Okay.
But then, you move over to Europe, where digital sovereignty initiatives have pushed everything over to open source, right? They don't want to work with the hyperscalers. They don't want to work with VMware either. They're going to embrace those open source solutions. So just having that in mind when you're looking for new customers and you're looking to give advice, I think is really important, because you might have to do a little bit more education about, not just what OpenStack is maybe, but what the open source philosophy is. And, back to the Watcher example of what the power of that is for being able to address customer needs and to address market needs.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point too, about the differences in the regions. And and for us, we offer in the US, we offer in Europe, and we're opening up over in Singapore here this year. And so yeah, it's pretty interesting, the differences. I definitely, this is a generalization, but I'll say this: like, when you're talking to the European customer, you're much more likely to be in this open source tribe together. Whereas, in the US, you're definitely often fighting brand attachment, even though they know it's not good for them. They're like, I love this A, B, and C. We need to have A, B, and C, like how AWS sets up the dual routers for their VPN as a service, and how does OpenStack do that? Okay, you got to do it a little bit differently with us. But they're also like, yeah, but I still want to do it that way. And you're like, well, you can, but look at what it cost you, and look at how far and distant you got from the technology when you did that. So it's not only just the dollars, it's you're just very distant from the technology. And so what kind of damage can that do to you, especially if you're like a very technical company and part of the products or the service or SaaS or whatever is very technical. So we definitely find ourselves in the US introducing and advocating a little bit more. For me, I'm excited to see Rackspace. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
A brand is is kind of funny, but you're right about that. But like being attached to a brand is how everybody got where they are with VMware, right? You know, and moving over to some other proprietary solution isn't going to help you in the long run. And that's why, you know, encouraging those folks to look beyond that brand, you know, that their boss signed off on forever ago, doesn't want to maybe admit that they made a bad decision, or feels comfortable with AWS, even though they're gouging on every monthly bill. You know, look beyond that, and I think, you know, you're selling things exactly the right way. Is like, hey, you can have a huge cost savings here. You can be just as secure in OpenMetal as you can on AWS or VMware, and I think that's a really important message.
Yeah, I think we're excited. I mean, for us, this is just a little history of OpenMetal, just because you know, I was never a VMware savvy user, and so it's been really interesting for us to start to become more and more skilled. And we've been lucky enough. Our business model tends that they tend to be, we kind of operate in what we call the tipping point areas. This is when a customer has reached a size where they're like, hey, you know, the public cloud, or even small systems like VMware, well, back in the day, not anymore. They used to be great. They were really efficient for those smaller use cases. Like, I got an idea, let me just get the resource, fire up, and just roll, proof it out, and see what it is. And that is still a wonderful thing that the public clouds bring to the table today. But we tend to be in this tipping point where customers are at a certain scale, and so they've gone past that. They no longer want that instant on cost and that instant on like need, because these systems for them are steady state, and they've been running at, you know, many dollars each month for a long time. And so for us, I think we're lucky enough to be able to work really closely with these customers. And so our VMware knowledge is increasing and increasing. And so I think for us, we've now targeted to say, okay, that is going to be a staple of our business, because both it aligns with us philosophically, that says, hey, we're helping people own their own cloud, own their own technology, like be close to the technology again, and respect the open source contributions that are there. And so I think partly we're really excited that customers are teaching us stuff. We get to be so close to that and go, oh yes, that's how you should do it. And it's interesting for us, for at least for me, is like for OpenMetal, the growth has been really exciting. But people often say, all right, when you're at a certain size, growth is relatively straightforward. You know, if you're doubling or more than that, well, at a certain size, you're going to face this. Well, I'm really large. How do you keep that up? Mm-hmm. And I was looking, and I was going, okay, we're pulling from obviously the public cloud, so that's a massive place to pull stuff. But then this kind of just like rolled into our laps, where it was like, whoa, VMware is about to push a whole bunch of customers onto the market.
Right.
Like, that's a really interesting thing. So if you don't mind, give me an idea of what do you think might happen as we're looking forward. Is there, you know, are we at the beginning of the moves? Where are people in their contracts? Maybe what might we expect for 26, maybe 27?
Sure.
Yeah, what you might expect there.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is this has got a long tail. You know, there are lots of companies that ended up renewing their VMware contract. I think you mentioned earlier in the show, somebody's advice was, well, maybe stay put for a minute and make sure you're making the right move. And I think that's prudent. A lot of these larger companies can absorb that cost and until they can figure out something. So, you know, a lot of them renewed just at the end of 2023 or just at the beginning of 2024. So you might see those folks popping back up in 3 years. But, you know, from now until at least the next 5 years, I would expect this kind of trajectory to continue, and folks will have either decided to just absorb that VMware costs, and Broadcom will have their premium customers that they so desperately want, and everybody else is going to have made a decision at that point. And so I think, you know, the next 5 years is really about what can we do at the OpenInfra Foundation. You know, what can we do as an ecosystem of companies that are part of OpenStack to help educate the market and teach people why signing up for something that doesn't lock you in and doesn't put you in vendor lock-in is better for your long-term growth and sustainability.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely with you. Yeah, so I think on our side, we're continuing to get better at this, continuing to publish content that tells about the experiences that the customer had, including some of the technical challenges sometimes that they run into. I know we've got to do a few more releases around that, just and also just expertise in-house to say, yeah, you're looking at this service, but you don't need to do that anymore. Like that's actually an older way of doing it. There's an easier way to do that nowadays. And here's how OpenStack, how you can leverage OpenStack when you do that. Yeah, no, I think it's really exciting. Would you think that there must be pretty good reaction in the private proprietary world too? Is that they're probably also growing, I guess, getting more aggressive, or what do you see there?
From like, are you talking about like Nutanix or something along those lines?
Could
or?
be, yeah, like Nutanix or even the
Yeah.
other open source alternatives. But yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So yeah, you mentioned proprietary. So I think there are opportunities. People are making choices to move off of VMware onto other proprietary systems. I would say that that's a bad move.
Yeah.
And for all the reasons that Broadcom gave you, who's to say that those companies can't pull the exact same stunt and increase your contract? And in fact, I'll take this opportunity to plug. You mentioned sort of educating your customers, and we're doing the same thing at OpenInfra. We have a VMware Migration Working Group that is for members of the OpenInfra Foundation. Last year, we published a white paper around kind of comparing and contrasting VMware to OpenStack, but also letting people know what migration tools are available. This year will be much more focused on what is the state of OpenStack today, what kind of vendors are out there that can help you with this move, and I'm talking beyond just migration, but really helping you with your long-term decision making, and so I would just continue to hammer home that choosing open source software is just the best path forward for you and your organization. In the same way that Linux is the de facto, is the de facto operating system for almost every major business today, except for people, I guess, still on VMware. Then why, if you trust Linux, then you should trust OpenStack and you should trust other open source alternatives.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think I'm definitely there. I'm in that spot too, where I think I don't question that this is going to be a major source of growth for OpenStack, and that it will also, and again, going back to that, you all are really listening to the customers, the end users, is that it's going to drive improvement in OpenStack. So for me, I think we're thrilled, right, that we're actually watching this happen, and that we get to benefit from it and be part of the process. So one is, I would say that's an exciting part of it. I know sometimes when we dig in and talk about like options, or how you actually map things from the VMware world over into the OpenStack world a bit. We also, of course, bleed in. So I'll give a shout out to Ceph for those of you who may not realize it. It's one of the most common commingled software with OpenStack that provides storage. And so like you'll see things like vSAN and live migrate and not live migration, vMotion, sorry, over in the world of VMware, but there's comparable systems inside of OpenStack. So a lot of times people are like, oh, this is really important to me, that I can easily take a hardware node out of the system because I have this vMotion, I have this ability to live migrate. Well, with a properly configured OpenStack, in our case, backed by Ceph, there are other providers underneath that could be doing the storage layer. But for us, in the case of Ceph, you can have confidence that you can actually do these same things. So if you need to depopulate a server for whatever reason, let's say sometimes it's simple stuff like, oh, actually, I just want to relocate the server. The power, I've got open power somewhere else. I just need to relocate that. You should have confidence that these major components that are typically had they have to be done, whether it's maintenance tasks, it's services that need to be provided, is that OpenStack has those. This is a rich and long, vibrant past that supports the quality of what the OpenStack's product is today. And so sometimes I think companies are nervous about, well, can it do A, B, and C? And the fact is, it's a very, very rich ecosystem. And pretty much, yes, the answer is yes, it can do A, B, and C. And you might just have to learn a little bit of different nomenclature. It's not vMotion, it's live migration. And yes, you do have to have a properly set up storage system that supports that, so that it's kind of this instant, one ping drop or no ping drops as that stuff actually occurs. But so I always shout out to Ceph, though, and we implement Ceph both hyperconverged with OpenStack. And again, this has been going on for a long time in the industry. So we're very familiar, and the industry is very familiar with letting those hyperconverge together and being stable and supportive of each other. We also run them autonomously sometimes as well. And so I'm actually not so familiar with what VMware's kind of object storage approach would be. And so I probably should be. So I shouldn't ask those questions that I should probably in research. But since you're here, Jimmy, I get to do that. Give me a sense of your guys' take on Ceph and where it fits in. And then if there's anything on the VMware side to kind of help our VMware people looking to shop off of VMware, what are some of the things that they might look at where they say, hey, actually OpenStack has complementary systems like Ceph to make sure that you know what they are, and that OpenStack works brilliantly with it?
Yeah, so I would say not only are you making a good transition, but OpenStack is an opportunity to modernize your workloads. And if you look at using OpenStack and Kubernetes together, you're going to have many of the same choices that you had with VMware, and also a whole bunch of new ones. There are features in OpenStack that work better than what you've got in VMware. Like Keystone, for example, is, I think, what is it? RBAC is in VMware. Like Keystone is much more powerful than Active Directory, which VMware uses. There's RESTful integration. There's a suite of APIs that you can use, that just things that you just don't really have access to on VMware that you do on OpenStack. I will shut up on this topic, though, because it starts to get a little bit more technical than what I'm capable of, especially around what features are on VMware storage. I don't know the answer to that.
Got it. Okay. No, but you bring up a great point that because OpenStack one of its very large use cases is with providers, and providers are an infrastructure as code, API first mentality nowadays, just because in order to do these large scale, you have to function that way. You're not going to be in a GUI setting stuff up for customers. Right. You're providing, you're doing it via API. So that's an awesome point that as you move out of the VMware world, there are new opportunities because some of the stuff that OpenStack is driven by that mentality. And so rich APIs, an API first attitude, it may be a great opportunity for you as a VMware runner to say, like, I'm tired of having to write tutorials to teach people to go in and do this thing in the interface when you should be doing it infrastructure as code or via the API. So yeah, I think maybe if we get a chance again to talk, Jimmy, a focus in that area, I think would be great. I'd kind of course, forgotten that, right? We are an API first type company, so we naturally gravitate towards that without realizing that that could be a real opportunity for people to take that advancement. I see we also got Jimmy, if you don't mind, we have a question here that we saw pop up. I think that one's more in your world. If you don't mind, maybe take that one.
Sure. Yeah. I think the question is why VMware and not, for example, Citrix. Good question. I believe Citrix users would also benefit from moving to open source solutions, but I think why the focus on VMware right now is just because of what VMware has kind of done from a contract perspective to their customers. Citrix hasn't done that yet, but they could, which is sort of the point. Is when you're going with single vendor proprietary solutions, you run the risk of is the company sound? Is the company going to change my contract or license on a whim? And so when you go with a stable open source project that has hundreds of companies contributing to it and thousands of companies relying on it to run their business, then you have a much better opportunity to make a safe decision from a management perspective and from a cost perspective.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Cool. I know we're starting to get close to wind down, so I think if you don't mind, let's spend a little bit of time in just this subject, which is if you're hesitant about leaving VMware, or if you, you're kind of facing this. So maybe it's probably something we can both weigh in on. But Jimmy, if you don't mind, maybe the first one really is like, if you're hesitant about leaving VMware, what's our macro advice? What kind of guidance would we be giving companies that are in this situation?
I would say look for a trusted partner and look for, you're not on your own out there. There are consultants. You can look at the OpenStack marketplace, openstack.org/marketplace, and find everything from commercial distributions of OpenStack to independent consultants that can help you make those decisions, to a lot of those migration providers that we mentioned. It's a big new world, and a big part of ensuring success when moving off of VMware is you want to take care of your employees, those folks that have been loyal employees to you and been working on VMware. Help train them on a new technology that's going to last far into the future, and then also help future-proof your business by sticking with an open source solution that allows you to work with those different partners. And there's a lot that you can learn out there, and I think moving towards cloud native modern workloads is ultimately good for business in the long run, and there are tons of people that can help you do it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Again, you see, I'm taking a little bit of notes, so I like it when I hear somebody say something very salient for me or resonates with me. I'm like, oh, I got to write that down. So I'm sorry if you see me glancing off screen here. I'm taking notes.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Following that, I'll give a compliment to that, I think. So from our side, if we were addressing this kind of same question. So first, partner the marketplace on OpenInfra, yes, absolutely, super solid place to find all kinds of companies that have joined the community and that are present and active, and definitely it's great that patronage of those organizations help the mother organization be stronger. So again, we always thank people that are traversing through that and at least learning about the brands there through the OpenInfra site. You kind of, I'll take a little more tactical view of this. So I think I mentioned before, get your dates in order, check your contracts, check what's going on, because you are going to have to deal with it. Like, it's just, this is the situation, so you do have to deal with it. But like Jimmy, you just said, like, well, there are ways that you can turn this around and look at your staff and say, actually, this is going to be another skill set, another way to kind of raise up and challenge them. And good engineers, they want good challenges, right? They're going to look at this stuff and say, all right, this is kind of cool. Now, I definitely say in the US, the engineers sometimes are like, oh boy, OpenStack, huh? Okay, let's get them.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Versus some of the Europeans are like, yeah, OpenStack, let's do it right away. Because they recognize they want to be part of that tribe. But I would also say one of the challenges is that you're going to end up running a project that costs money next to paying that typical monthly or longer term costs that you have. So you want to be cognizant about this. But I think I can go on record is that you will recover those costs once you're over on OpenStack. And it does take some time, and it takes some learning. It takes some stretching of your engineers and maybe even yourself to say, like, yes, this is going to be a little bit different. But rest assured, I can say this with absolute confidence because we literally do it every day, that you will make up those dollars of having to run this program or project together. So it doesn't mean it's overnight. You got to look a little bit further ahead, but you can also talk to those vendors that are out there. We're one that's like this. We typically work in agreements, and we very much know that this is happening. And so we often can try to help mitigate that crossover time, both with whether we can give you easy access to things for training purposes. It doesn't cost anything. Again, you can QR code it and you'll see it immediately. But that you can, with confidence, when you're going into your CFO and saying like, look, not just only do we have to get off this because we've got this impending doom approaching, you might very well have a drop in cost to your today's dollars. So not even what it was going to be when you were going to get that renewal, but that after you make this transition, you can rest assured that we're in the open source world, we're aligned with being smart about spending a dollar. No question that
I think
organizations like that. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I think the total cost of ownership. Yes, it might be a little bit painful when you first transition as you get people trained up, and maybe you have to get new hardware, or maybe you have to pay for some new services. But long term, and I'm not even talking about like years, I'm talking about 6 months, you're going to see a massive savings between what you were paying with VMware or hyperscalers compared to what it costs to run OpenStack. No question.
No question. Yeah. And so I know sometimes that's really a difficult thing because companies are like, oh, shoot, I'm going to have to do a little more work right now to obviously pull this off. But I would also say, like, you have a date that's approaching that can be very, very painful. And just again, knowing based upon what you're paying today, if you had made that transition, you already would have had a cost savings benefit plus new technology and closer to these things. So yeah, I think I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to kind of weigh in on. That is, look for, again, the marketplace is great over at OpenInfra. Yeah, OpenStack. Sometimes I like to address this one too, if you don't mind doing it. Sometimes it bothers me to no end, so I'll say this. If you search for a bunch of OpenStack stuff, you're going to see Google's going to suggest you, is OpenStack dead? And I just want to say, it's so irritating to me when I do this. So anyways, I'm just going to get a little fired up here. There's no question that this is a vibrant and growing community. So Jimmy, you probably know the numbers maybe better than I do.
Yeah, we've got 110,000 community members. There's, I believe, from 183 different countries. I think that's right. But yeah, it's a massive group of people who get together at events all over the world. The software is well supported. It's well maintained. I know because I know lots of the maintainers. Businesses are fully invested in OpenStack, and many of them, just like OpenMetal, have based their entire business on it. It's a healthy, vibrant ecosystem, and that's why not only is it not dead, it's very much alive, and it's a better alternative to one company holding your company hostage. So bet on the market.
Yeah, bet on the market. Bet on there is, like Jimmy just said, there's so many people around the world that actively support this. There's tons of business models that are very successful. There's very, very large hyperscalers actually who under the hood both either have a smattering of OpenStack or have a lot of OpenStack. Yeah, right. Like, so this is what I say is you always want to share, though people sometimes may have a brand impression of OpenStack. It is very mature, very supported, very enthusiastic people, and then market forces that are re-embracing it, And so, anyways, I think we'll have to end, Jimmy. I know we're hitting our time here, but I appreciate everybody who joined us, and Jimmy, thank you for sharing and being a champion out there for us, and for OpenInfra. Again, it's such a very exciting thing for me to see some of these. Watcher, for example, some of these projects that we all do depend on, because we're often selling to people that depend on those, to see the renewed interest in there. So very exciting, and we're looking forward to this year and next year and helping people get off of VMware onto something they should be open source on. So, all right. Any last words, or we'll sign off here?
No, thank you so much, Todd, for the opportunity. I enjoyed the discussion, and if you're interested in joining the OpenInfra Foundation, hit me up. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it.
All right, Jimmy. Thanks, everybody. Definitely appreciate
Thank
it. We'll see you next time.
Have a great day.
All right. Bye-bye.